Welcome everybody who's joining. It's fantastic to have you all come onto the Zoom today. It's really great to see so many people here. Brilliant. We're just going to wait a few more minutes for the students to join us as well. So it's really great to see everybody. Throughout this talk, if you have any questions at all for fantastic Dr. Shanton Chang, please do write them in the chat. You can write the chat to everybody or you can send them directly to Ms. Shaza. Just going to wait for the students to join in. They should be coming in a few minutes. In the meantime, I'm just going to introduce Dr. Shanton Chang. He's joining us from the University of Melbourne. And he's a leading expert in 21st century careers. So we are very lucky to be joined by Dr. Shanton today. It's fantastic to welcome him back to Alice Smith School. There may have been some of you that were here when he did a previous talk, and that was really fantastic. Obviously, it was in person in the lecture theatre, but today, via fantastic technology, we are able to welcome him back again, which is brilliant.
Thanks for having me, Ruth. It's a pleasure.
It's really nice to have you back. What is your background, Shanton? Where are you in the university?
I'm in the School of Computing and Information Systems, and I'm actually a professor in human information behavior. So one of the things that I do is, the research that I do is actually studying what people do online, interactions online, everything from e-commerce through to things like most recently, video conferencing psychotherapy sessions and how that is working out for people. So I'm very fascinated by what happens in the online space and how that mitigates human behavior and interactions. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It's an exciting area to be working in. And so my job takes me a lot out to industry and to people who employ our students, talk to them about what they expect from our students, what they expect from graduates, and the kind of things that they're looking out for when they do job interviews and all that sort of stuff, you know. And not just in Australia, obviously, because our students go internationally, so we have to be familiar with what is going on around the world. And I hope they'll come through in the presentation. For those of you who have been to my previous presentation, you might see that some of these are familiar because I would have talked about them. But you will be the first group to see my 2021 presentation, which incorporates a lot of the things that has happened to the world in 2020. Obviously, the world has changed again, whether we like it or not. And that has had some impact on the skill demand, and that has had some impact on the way that, you know, careers might shift going forward, post-pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. It's not something that any of us expected last time you would have been at Alice Smith, but yeah, it's definitely going to affect jobs going forward. Okay, I think we're about a minute away from the students being here, so we'll start at 1:50. And so we'll just give the students a minute or so to come into the Zoom room. So just a reminder that anybody who has a question as Shanton is talking, please do just type it in the chat. And if you want to do it privately, then please do just private message Miss Shaza, and then she will post it anonymously in the chat. So both options available. And if you would like to turn your cameras on, that would be great. It's always nice to see faces when you're presenting in Zooms. So it'd be brilliant if you could turn your cameras on. Okay, I think I'm going to pass over. So again, just for anybody who's just joined, we're very pleased to welcome Dr. Shanton Chang from the University of Melbourne. He's a leading expert in 21st century careers, and he's just mentioned how he's been looking into the changes that obviously the recent pandemic has made the future of the workplace. And we are very lucky to be the first group of people to hear his 2021 presentation on future careers. I'm going to pass over to Shanton now. Thank you very much for joining us, Shanton.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And thank you, everyone, especially to the students and to the parents coming in. It's always a pleasure to talk to students who are thinking about what's in store for them. You know, the reason why I'm working in this space is because I'm very passionate about making sure that the next generation has a clearer sense of what to expect when they go to university and what happens beyond that. I think one of the challenges, you know, I was a student once where it was really difficult to try and get any sort of information. And people kept asking me, what are you going to be when you grow up? What are you going to do when you go to university? And I basically had no answer. And it was assumed that I should know, right? Especially at the time when I was in year 12 or year 11. And the reality is kind of like, well, I had a vague idea, but not really. And particularly if you have not had any work experience before, that makes it really hard. So this presentation is really to try and address some of those issues. And hopefully for the parents who are attending as well, you might find some interesting insights into what employers are expecting of graduates as well. I want to begin this presentation by acknowledging the elders of the indigenous community from which I am presenting, the Wurundjeri people. You will see when if you ever visit the University of Melbourne that we have this really big sign, Wabinjeka, which means welcome in the indigenous language of the local indigenous group here, the Wurundjeri people. And this is an important part of the way that we acknowledge the indigenous people who are the traditional owners of the land here in Melbourne. So today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about careers of the 21st century. But we really can't talk about careers of the 21st century without acknowledging the fact that the world has changed so much in the 21st century. And when I talk about the 21st century, I now have to include the fact that we have gone through a whole year of the pandemic as well. So when we look at the 21st century, one of the stark differences between what we are going through right now is the fact that the online and the digital space has played such a huge role in everything that we do, right? So if you look at this slide, this is from Domo that tells us what's happening around the world every minute of the day. It is massive, all right? And the reality is this is 2020 and 2021 is going to get even more as more and more people continue to come online and businesses start to really operate online even more. If we thought before the pandemic that companies were going online, we would never have imagined how much they can actually go online, right? Because the reality is most of us were still working face-to-face. And although there are lots of people who are doing and working remotely, the reality was that was not a huge thing, even though the technology was there. The reality of the pandemic, however, has meant that nearly every organization across all sectors have now learned to actually shift to the digital environment. Now, with that comes a few changes that I'm going to be talking about a bit later on in this presentation. So going back to this idea that the 21st century is really the digital century, the reality is that what it means is that a lot of the jobs that we are looking at has also changed, right? And the careers therefore have changed. I don't know if some of you might have read things like that say that, you know, the millennials are going to have up to 10 different careers in their lifetime. You know, I'm from a Gen X and I can barely hold down one career. How can you possibly have up to 7 to 10 careers in your lifetime? It is a very hard concept to understand. So I want to unpack some of that so that you can understand where it's all going and what it actually means. Another way of looking at 21st century jobs is, you know, this is a word cloud that I generated about 7 to 8 years ago. I have generated more word clouds since then, but it hasn't changed very much in the last 5 to 6 years. So I've used this one. And if you try and find out, you know, what are companies saying about the jobs and the kind of jobs that are available and the kind of skills and aptitude that they are looking for amongst employees and graduates, you find these keywords. They're expecting that graduates will understand things like well-being, digital, able to accept challenging situations, understand social media, sustainability is a big one, so is information literacy, adaptability, problem solving. All these words start coming up over and over and over again, even social responsibility. Now, what's interesting is that in the 20th century, if you try to, not that there was Google, but when you look for a job in the 20th century, you would more likely see words like lawyer, engineer, doctor, dentist, those kind of more traditional accounting, business manager, those kind of words would appear. In the 21st century, those words are not appearing as much. Rather, it's more the description of the kind of skills that people are expected to have if they want to go into those professions. So that's been a shift, right? So this means that, when you look for a job, if you want to be a doctor, you have to understand not just, health, obviously, and medicine, but you also have to understand things like sustainability, well-being, digital, social media, right? That's the 21st century. If you're going to be a banker, you also need to understand security, sustainability, well-being, digital, and social media. So those kind of things have become a common thread that many industries are looking for, whether you're working for the government, through to the not-for-profit sector, through to the corporate sector. These are the key things that companies are looking for. In the 21st century, however, it's not just about these words that you have to grapple with. You will start to see that jobs are changing as well. So the next slide, some of you might have seen this, but this is slightly different because, of course, every year this slide changes, right? Here are some of the top jobs in the world, including Malaysia, all right, and Australia, and the rest of Southeast Asia and North America. Here are the most in-demand jobs. And here is the per annum salary, okay, in Australian currency, obviously AUD, because that's where I'm based. You will see that these are new jobs that look, I don't know if you know all of this. If there's anyone who has questions at this point because you're not clear what these jobs are, please feel free to ask and put in the chat function. Okay, so you start to see that these are jobs that are in demand, all right? And you don't see anything about the traditional kind of jobs in there. In fact, a lot of these are very new jobs. And one of the things that I always share with people is that the oldest amongst these jobs is about 15 years old. That means that when the students were born, some of these jobs had just been created. Some of these jobs are as old as the students. Now, this is really interesting because a lot of us are still thinking about jobs that have been around for the last 100 years, an engineer, a lawyer that have been around since the 20th century. But when in fact, if you look at fastest growing jobs, it's the ones listed here, right? In my previous slide, for those of you that I've spoken to before, you would not have seen things like telehealth experts. This is new. This has come in the last year alone. Okay, that has become a really big one in the last year for obvious reasons. Okay, so I want to stop there for a second and stop share and to see if there were any questions from the slides there. So, were there any jobs that were in your mind that you needed a bit of explanation? Okay, then I will go back to sharing it. Okay. So one of the key things, of course, with this is that how do you do this? How do you go into it? For example, in Malaysia, two of the fastest growing jobs are the user experience designers and data scientists. You will find that there's not a lot of universities that are running programs like this, right? So, for example, how do you actually get into the job of a data scientist or a user experience designer? So you will actually have to look for more specialized programs as well in order to be able to go into those jobs. I will talk about them a bit more later. I've got a question here. Can I explain what a data scientist is? A data scientist is somebody who looks at, because a lot of people and companies and consumers and citizens are spending a lot of time online, right? We spend a lot of time online. Every time we are online, we are leaving a little bit of ourselves behind. It's not hair, it's not skin, it's our data, all right? A lot of people don't realize this, but while you have your GPS, we know exactly where you are moving from point A to point B. How long are you spending in point A and point B? Which supermarket do you shop at? Which shopping center are you at? What products are you buying via e-commerce, for example? All the things that you do online, you are providing valuable data. And everyone from government through to companies, through to not-profit sector, want to analyze that data to find out how to influence and interact and engage with you better. So for example, the traffic controllers, trying to understand when cars move in certain direction. They are able to get the data online now and analyze it and make better decisions around how quickly the lights turn, when to keep it longer, the pedestrian crossing, do we need it? All that sort of stuff informed by data. So the data scientists are the people who work with a lot of data, okay? So they have to be good at both computing and statistics as well, and be able to scrape the data from the internet. So this, of course, makes it a very, very powerful job all over the world, across all the different sectors, okay? Are there any other questions about any other positions? I can see that there are some. Please explain what a green architect. The green architect is so these are the people who, I always use Malaysia and Singapore as an example, okay? In Malaysia, for example, you have a lot of amazing, big, tall buildings. What you tend to do is, when you want to refresh it, you don't have to destroy the whole building and rebuild everything again. So one of the key things there is you need to think about the green engineers who come in to build more sustainable retrofitting, to use sustainable material, or to build buildings that are more sustainable and doesn't chew up as much air conditioning as it currently does, right? My colleague in Malaysia always said that there's a lot of thinking around aircon, right? Everybody wants to have air conditioning, but then there are ways that you can build buildings to make it more sustainable. So those are the green architects. Questions around the difference between data scientist, data analyst, and data engineer. Yeah, people get confused about them, but the thing is that a student who comes into a good program would have to have the good skills that can transcend all three. Let's put it this way: a data analyst could be a data scientist or a data engineer, okay? A data analyst is the broader term around what are people. These are people who look at data to try and analyze what's going on. To do that, you need to be a data scientist, to have those skills and to be able to create, I guess, software that can get the data in the first place, and that's what the data engineer do. A data analyst is a general term for people who are more data scientists or data engineer. And the difference between digital entrepreneurs and digital strategies. A digital strategist can work for any organization to think about what their digital presence is and what they do. A digital entrepreneur is somebody who is starting their business online, running it. It's like an entrepreneur is your own small business. So for example, Uber started as by a digital entrepreneur. Now there are digital strategists working for Uber, for example. There are also digital strategists working for Maybank across all the companies. But digital entrepreneur are people who create new businesses online, okay? What is a telehealth expert? Okay, this is very new, right? Although this job has been around for the last 50 years, it's only in the last year that the demand has really gone up. Nowadays, people are seeing their psychologists via video conferencing. People are talking to nurses via video conferencing. People are working across health using the health apps on their mobile. So there is a different way of conducting health and ensuring that people are healthy and that diagnosis is done properly via the online space. So it's not just being a doctor anymore. It's also you need people who can translate the work of doctors, or doctors who can work online, or psychotherapists who can work online. So it's a group of people who start to specialize in being able to deliver health services online. And that's a telehealth expert. There, in Malaysia, for example, you start to see that there's a huge demand for telehealth nurses, right, who can advise regional and rural areas and communities, for example. Right, not everyone can do that, and they actually have to work with the limitations of technology and broadband as well in order to do that. Some of them might use phones, more traditional landline phones. But then what kind of information do you have to get from people when they're not face-to-face to make sure that they've got the best healthcare as well? Really, all these things changing because the world is changing, okay? All right. So one of the key things, of course, is that it's all very well and good for me to show you, you know, what are the most popular jobs in demand and all that. That doesn't mean it's the right job for you. This is really important, okay? Just because there are a lot of that kind of job doesn't mean you should go into it. And this is where the core of this presentation is going to be. How do you decide what it is you should be doing? All right, that's the question on a lot of people's minds when they are in year 11 or year 12, especially the parents as well. All right, so I'm going to take time to go through all of that. So the next slide, I'm going to tell you what employers are telling me. Okay, what employers in different parts of the world are telling me. Okay, so here we go. Employees, when I ask them, what are you looking for in an employee, and what are you looking for in our graduates? Okay, so the question is, how can students improve their employability, right? So you would all be asking, you know, the teachers and the career guidance counselors, how can I make sure that my child gets a job? How do I, so this is it. How can students improve their employability? Well, the first one is all the companies always say, well, if a student says they are going to be an accountant, they better know how to do accounting. If a student is going to be a doctor, they better know medicine. So the technical and content competence is really important. So you still have to have those traditional ideas of, if you're going to be a translator, you need to know the languages, right? So that's the technical and content competence in the area that you are interested in. That's the first thing. That's just one thing. Then they give me a list of all these other things that they think is absolutely crucial if a student is to get a job, because technical and content competence is not enough. Every recruiter that I talk to tells me, just because you've got a good accounting degree doesn't mean you're going to get a job as an accountant in my company. You also need to have confidence and adaptability. Now, confidence and adaptability means that you have to be able to actually problem solve as well and be able to adapt to new situations, right? That's what companies are looking for. You need to have communication, collaboration, and persuasion skills. That means that you need to be able to communicate your ideas, all those sorts of things, and be able to collaborate with others. You need to have knowledge of different cultures, all right? And have emotional intelligence. It's a huge ask, but that's what they're looking for. You need to have a knowledge of the industry. And I say, how can you possibly have a knowledge of the industry even before you start working? And their answer always is, Google it, okay? This is the harsh reality because there's so much information, we should be using it. And finally, understanding employer expectations. Right. So the questions that students ask me is, well, if we're doing a degree, we can get the technical and content competence. But how do we do all the other things? Well, this is how you do it. If you do well in a good degree, you get your technical and content competence. Easy, right? So if you say you are going to be good at banking, do a finance degree, you've got the banking, technical, and content competence. However, what about all the other things like confidence, communication, cultures, industry? Here are the hints. You know, you have to practice networking outside your comfort zone, improve your language skills and team building skills. You have to interact across cultures and social networking. You have to research and network with about your industry and network with the industry partners. This is why I spend a lot of time with my industry partners to bring them to the university so that the students can interact with them. This is absolutely crucial, all right? So this is where a lot of people make the mistake of just thinking that if we get technical and content competence, we don't have to worry about anything else. That's the wrong answer. And because in the 21st century, the expectations have changed so much, okay? I had one HR recruiter tell me this. It's like this, Shanton. He told me, when I'm looking for the next person to join my company, all right, I'm basically having to find somebody who can not only do the job, but is somebody that I want to see every day for 5 days a week. Do I want to see this person? I want to see somebody who has confidence, who is adaptable, flexible, can solve problems, right? So therefore, I'm not just looking for the best degree from a university. I need to see if the person's attitude is right, okay? So this is why students need to spend time on all these transferable skills on top of just doing a degree. I know that in Malaysia, for the longest time, students are told, just study hard and don't do anything else. The reality is now, they not only have to study hard, they have to do all these other things around networking, improving their team building skills, interact across cultures. Very crucial. Does that make sense? All right. Are there any questions so far? Okay, I will keep going. So this is the context of my presentation of saying, if you want to get a good job, you need to have all these skills, right? So, but then I'm now going to focus on the technical and content competence, because a lot of students want to know what should they be studying at university. So the next 3 slides is going to focus on that. Okay, here we go. Oh, one thing I forgot to say. Since the pandemic, now employers are telling me, as of towards the end of last year and earlier this year in January, employers are now telling me all these things that I just talked about, but they must be able to do it online and remotely. All right. So not only do they have to have confidence and adaptability, they need to be able to show that online. They need to be able to collaborate and persuade online and done remotely. All right. So now for us in the university, we have to build these skills and ensure that our remote learning strategies is actually giving students these new skills as well, to make sure that by the time they finish their degree, they can conduct a Zoom interview with a panel of interviewees to the biggest companies and be fine doing it, right? So that's a new skill. It's very different to face-to-face interview, having a Zoom interview, for example. So again, these are the new skills that we're building in at university to make sure that they've got those skills. All right, so these are the skills. Now, let's talk about the technical content competence of what to study. All right, so the first thing, no matter what you want to study in the future, is you have to understand security and sustainability. Whether you're doing an arts degree, a medicine degree, an engineering degree, any degree, you need to understand security and sustainability. Every employer is expecting their employees to understand how security and sustainability will strategically impact on their businesses, government, society, and their organization. So security ranges from things like understanding cybersecurity and digital security and personal security. Sustainability is about things like well-being, climate change, and understanding that resources are limited. All right, so these are key things that students have to be clear about when they come out of university. All right, so whatever it is you want to study, these are core ideas that must be a part of your thinking and a part of the way that you view the world. All right, so I'm going to show you 4 different colors, and they are going to represent some different sets of skills that employers are looking for. These are the technical kind of skills, okay? The first set of skills are things like analyzing and decision-making, and awareness that knowledge is constantly evolving, to be able to deal with complexity and ambiguity and understand the limitations and opportunities of methodologies and data. So this is a very process-driven set of skills. These are for students who really like to do detailed work and think about the process. How do things happen? What's the process by which things happen? And how can the process change? And if the process and the methodology changes, how does it change the outcome? So this is very, very much process-driven. You must be good with details, okay? I can see some of you might go, oh, this is not for me. But for some of you, this is perfect, right? The red skills, this is about understanding the impact of identity and power in the way that human society works. You have to understand the role and impact of communication, conflict, negotiation, and collaboration. It's all about reasoning and critical thinking and looking at the way human society works. Okay, very different to the gray skills. The gray skills are very process driven. This one is more human driven. Okay, then you've got the yellow group, the yellow skills, and these ones, all right, it's about user experience. It's about the balance. Look at the second bullet point, the balance between efficiency, safety, comfort, pleasure, and effectiveness, and designing solutions in a practical and creative way, visualizing, creating solutions. Okay, these are the people who are more creative in some sense. And finally, the green one, talking about digital literacy, automating the world, enabling digital human interactions, and creating new solutions through technologies. All right. So I'm going to talk about this for the next few minutes. If you look at this as a student, what's really important is for you to think about which of these 4 colors appeals to you the most. Okay, so I'm gonna challenge you to type in chat, what is your favorite color? What color represents you best? So if you're in front of the watching this, okay, I'm gonna give you about 20 seconds. Don't be shy, be the first one to type in what is the color that appeals to you. Parents are welcome to put in as well. We've got reds, we've got grays, yellows, light green, gray. I can see people putting in. Okay, the one that appeals to you the most, that you think this is me, this is who I am. Okay, all right, that's very good. Okay, thank you for that. Now I want you to think, what is the one color that you think would be a nightmare if you had to do it every day? What color is a nightmare for you? Now, this might be a bit more difficult, but for some of you, it will be easy. I can see some nightmare yellows. Green is a nightmare for some. Green. Oh, so many greens. Some grays, some red, greens. Okay, green. All right, okay. Fantastic. All right. So why am I showing you all this? Okay, why am I showing you all this? Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide and I'm going to show you what you should be studying. Okay, the idea of these slides is to show you this. These are the skills that are in high demand. These are the skills that are in high demand out there in industry. Okay, the grays, the reds, the yellows, and light green. One of the key things though is you have to know what color you are, because you cannot be all 4. The reality is the only person who can be all 4 is a born genius. Okay, it takes a Leonardo da Vinci to be all 4, and the reality is very few people would like all the colors. Most of us would like 1, maybe 2. Okay, and would find at least one of those to be a nightmare. Okay. So here's why I'm sharing these skills with you. What we are saying is that in the 21st century, if you are somebody who is excellent in the red skills, you can take that set of skills and work in 20 different jobs, okay? You can work in 20 different jobs. For example, if you decide that you are red and you want to really understand human society and you are interested and passionate about being a journalist, so you're going to study mass comm or journalism, all right? For example, then you decide, oh, I'm going to go and work for the newspaper, but the newspaper now has no jobs because nobody reads newspapers and you don't want to work for, this particular newspaper. Does that mean you're out of a job? No. You take those journalism skills and you go and work for Maybank, for example, in their communications right? The same skills that you took in as a journalist will be highly in demand by the bank or the government, or the zoo, or the public health system that's trying to communicate with people about vaccination, for example, right? So those same journalistic skills are skills that are transferable. So we're saying that all your red skills doesn't have to be confined to journalism. Once you're trained as those skills for journalism, even though those jobs no longer exist, you can take those jobs and go somewhere else, right? So that's why picking your color and being clear on your color is very important. Now, if you want to be the best red, what are the degrees you're going to do? If you're going to be the best gray, what colors are you going to be? So I'm going to share with you the kind of degrees that you would do to enhance those skills, okay? Here we go. Okay, so if you said gray was your favorite and represents you, the kind of degrees that enhances those gray skills are commerce, business, economics, sciences, and medicine. Very much gray is about methodology, analytics, evolving knowledge, and limitations of methodologies and processes, okay? Very important. So if you said gray was your biggest nightmare, then don't do those degrees because you're gonna have nightmare time at the university, right? If you said red was your favorite, then it's arts, law, humanities, social science, education is in there as well, okay? If you are thinking yellow was your favorite, then you are a designer, architecture, industrial engineering, any other engineering, technical creatives, okay? Music production, for example. But if you are green, then it's digital, IT, data science. Data science is a bit light green, a bit gray, okay? Automation, information technology, information systems, right? But this also tells you what colors degree you need to avoid. If you had said that light green, and many of you said green was your nightmare, then you are not suited to come into digital and computer science and software engineering, right? So this is how I'm trying to help you. Why is this important? Okay, I'm going to go back to the previous slide. Okay, if you look at these slides, I'm going to ask you two very quick questions. The first question is this. If you wanted to work for Google, what color should you be? Do you all want to type in the chat function? What color do you think you should be if you want to work for Google? We've got some yellows and greens. We've got some any, okay, all right. Second question, if you wanted to work for a museum, what color should you be? Okay, we've got enough. Okay, now, let me tell you the answer, okay? If we were in the 20th century, the answer would be, if I want to work for Google, I should be light green. If I want to work for the museum, I should be red. That's the 20th century thinking. In the 21st century, it's very different. The answer to both the question, and some of you have put this, is it doesn't matter. It depends. And Elisa, thank you very much. Any of those colors. So for example, you could be a red and work for Google. You could be a yellow and work for a museum. Because we, in the 21st century, is all about collaboration. It's not about hiring the same kind of person for the entire company. So for example, in Google, it is absolutely accurate that something like 50% to 70%, I would say, of Google's workforce are either light green or yellow, but mostly light green, okay? So that's absolutely true. But the grays are the one who help make Google profitable, okay? The process driven. The reds are the one who keep Google out of trouble. You've seen recently that Google has been struggling to work with governments and society in general, right? Imagine if it was just all greens, they wouldn't be able to navigate this, right? So you start to see that it doesn't matter what color. The second thing is the museum. In the past, it used to just be red, But nowadays, as museums are defunded by the government, they also have to make money. They have involved science. If anyone has been to the British Museum, it's amazing. You need to have grays and greens and yellows. It's a full experience that includes digital, that includes science, that includes design. So it's not just red, right? So why am I sharing this with you? There is a question that parents keep asking and students keep asking. Which of these colors have more jobs? Okay, that is the wrong question to ask. If I were to tell you that green has the most jobs, right? But green was a nightmare for you. Should you be studying green? The answer is no. All right. So I should be promoting people to study green, but I know that green is not for everybody. If green is going to be your nightmare, please don't come and be my student because you're going to have a miserable time, right? This is really important for students and parents to be aware of. So, but then if you say, oh, but Google is so important, it has so many jobs. Then I say, well, then if you said that you were going to be red, you like red, then be the best red. If you are the best red you can be, Google will still want you, right? You don't have to be green to work at that, okay? I want to share with you a story about PwC and Deloitte, okay? Traditionally, they used to be all gray, right? Now they're recruiting from yellow and green as well, because they're consulting for companies that are technology driven and design driven. So now you don't have to be gray to work for KPMG or Deloitte. You could be red, you could be green, you could be yellow as well. But what they're looking for is the best red, the best gray, the best yellow. So this is why, the traditional idea of, you might be artistic, but there's no future for you, you must study green. Then you have a miserable time, you are going to really struggle, okay? I'm going to take us back again. I'm going to take us back one slide. Remember this slide, right? Those colors represent your technical and content competence. This is something that I really, if there's one thing to take away from today's presentation, please take this away. The reason why, as an academic who has been teaching students and mentoring students for the last 20 years, the reason why I say it's really important for you to choose the right color is because the right color has an impact on this entire slide for you, all right? Now, as a student, right, you know that there are some subjects where you spend an hour on it, you have done all your homework, you know all the answers, you're going to be one of the top students in that subject. At the same time, there are some subjects that you can spend 3 to 10 hours and you can barely pass it, right? Does that sound familiar? And this is where the colors come in. If you think that a color that is a nightmare is probably the kind of subject that's in that color, right? So this is why choosing the right color is very important when you come to university. If you choose the wrong color that is a nightmare for you, you're going to be spending 3 years putting in more work and more hours, studying harder than anyone else in your class and struggling to do well. And it's not a matter of whether you work hard or not. I have seen students work very hard, but it is just not for them, all right? And so what happens is if you spend 60 hours of the week studying because you are struggling with it, you have no time to do any of these other things around networking outside your comfort zone, building, team building, interacting across cultures, going to do part-time work, learning about the industry. You have no time because you are struggling with the subject matter. Whereas those students for whom they are enjoying it will only have to spend a few hours. They might study for 30 hours and the other 40 hours they can spend time networking, listening to what HR companies are doing, talking to industry, volunteering, networking, and building teams, right? Some of them even start their side projects that employers are looking for. So picking the right color is very important. And picking the right color, I know that parents worry because, oh, what if I pick that color and there are no jobs? Here is what I want to share with you. When you think about 21st century job security, we need to start changing the way we think about job security. Now, people say that there's no job security because, in the 20th century, job security was you come into a company as an accountant and you leave the company 40 years later as the most senior accountant. That's job security. In the 21st century, this is one thing you'll need to remember. They can take away your job, but they cannot take away your skills. So if you are the most brilliant red you can be, it's like that journalist who no longer wants to be a journalist, who has gone on to work for the Malaysian public health system as the top communicator because they are great journalists. They can take away your job. You might be tired of the job, but you can take your red skills and go to another sector. It's the same with gray, the green, or the yellow. Be the brightest color you can be. At the University of Melbourne, we encourage our students to do that, but we also want the students to not put all their eggs in one basket. So if you are the best, if you really enjoy yellow, but then we say, okay, good, now pick a second color that will be your backup, right? So you might be a combination of yellow and red or green and gray. So this is what we call breadth, so that you are not all just an engineer. We have engineers who are great musicians as well, right? We have IT people who are great at philosophy and thinking about digital ethics as well. And that's a huge demand for that as well. So it's a combination of colors, but all of them are encouraged to avoid the colors that is a nightmare for them, all right? So I've gone on to show you that here are the degrees, so you know the kind of degrees you should be aspiring to, right? In the 21st century, many of you say you don't want green, but the reality is no matter what color you are going into, you need to have a bit of green, okay? So if you were a gray who thinks that green was a nightmare, you still need to understand data analytics and data science. You don't have to be a data scientist, but you need to be able to work with data science and understand that data is very powerful. If you are red and you think green is a nightmare, you still need to understand the impact of technology on identity, on governments, on society, right? Yellows are all bounded with green nowadays, okay? And for greens, we have to understand how to communicate with the rest of the world. We can't just be programming, okay? So these are the kind of skills that the 21st century are looking for that enables you to go into different areas. What about the professions? I want to very quickly run through this and you can have a look at it. The traditional professions, they are still there. But as I was saying, even if you look at accounting and the Big Four, they're no longer just recruiting accounting majors. They are also recruiting STEM skills, IT skills, okay? For engineering and architecture, I send my engineering and IT students to drama classes so that they're able to collaborate better. And it's really important that they are able to do that. For the lawyers are now struggling with understanding digital technology and IP and the way that digital is changing interaction between human beings. And that becomes very important. In medicine, I spend a lot of time working with the medical faculty actually, because a lot of health is delivered through technology, right? Through health apps. Prevention is better than cure, and that's what health apps are for. And so digital health is a huge area. So whether or not you are thinking about going to an arts degree and all that, the reality is what you do with those skills. And an arts student, for example, can work in any of these areas depending on what his or her skills are. So that's why we encourage all our students to actually think outside the box and don't be shoehorned into that question of which career has the most jobs. It may have the most jobs, but if it is your nightmare, you're still not going to get a job in that area. Okay, this is really important to remember. I hope that helps you. Right. So this is Andy Sum, one of my alumni, and he completed his Master of Engineering. He is actually a co-founder of Crossy Road. So he was an engineering student, and when he was doing his engineering degree, he decided that he wanted to be creative, and he was into gaming. So this is what he created. So you start to see that this is the kind, for every MD, we have 10 others who are just as successful. And this idea that don't be confined to thinking, oh, I must be an engineer because my parents were engineer and my grandfather was engineer, even though I really like to be something else, right? If that is the area, then you need to be empowered to do that. All right. I mean, this is the principle that has led us to having some good numbers and all that. But the reality is that every student has his or her own journey. And that journey is very different. It's going to be dependent on who you are, what your passions are. And remember, it's not just about doing a degree. When you come to a university like Melbourne, for example, we spend a lot of time making sure that students have access to industry partners, that they have access to all these other skills and networking opportunities. The problem with Malaysian students, if I can be very honest with you all, is that they are too busy studying and no time for anything else, right? So when they come out with a degree, the technical competence, but none of the confidence, communication, all that. So one of the things that I know about Alice Smith is that they do a fantastic job in building that complete curriculum, that personal development. Don't lose that when you come to university, right? Pick the right degree, and then when you come, continue to think outside the classroom, continue to network, because that's important. All right, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to stop sharing as well. If you have any questions, please go to the chat and I'll answer them. I will stop sharing in a moment. Okay. All right. Are there any questions? No questions. Okay. Yes, I will send my email address. You can find me quite easily on LinkedIn, actually. LinkedIn is probably the best. You can find me on LinkedIn. Okay. The music industry, I got this question and I was ready to answer. I think one of the key things about production in music industry, what are the changes in the industry? I mean, it's really like product management if you think about it. With the music industry, it is changing a lot, and a lot of it is around knowing about marketing and also production and managing products, right? So although people think that production of music industry is about music, it's actually also about business. Okay, this is very important. So for example, we have students at Melbourne University who might be studying music, but at the same time will do some subjects from commerce and business as well. Conversely, we have students who are doing business, who are doing subjects from music and performance as well. But there are also other types of production, music production, such as performance production, staging the whole show. A lot of musicians at the moment are staging online concerts, right? How do you actually create that experience? And that brings in the technology as well. So it is a question of what area the student is interested in, okay? What skills should those who are not interested in STEM, well, I've shared with you, right? If you're not interested in STEM, there's a whole lot of opportunities in the arts and humanities space. There is so much, if you think about it, every company is looking for great arts graduates as well. But you need to have the confidence, the ability to understand what the company needs. The problem with some students who can't get jobs is they just have a degree and nothing else. They have none of the other things around adaptability, confidence, networking, and really trying to understand what is the industry that they're trying to get into. Do I see technical and vocational qualifications taking more precedence over knowledge jobs? Not at all. Knowledge workers are still in huge demand. When you look at technical and vocational qualifications, some of the key universities are actually bringing in some of those technical and vocational knowledge into the knowledge sphere as well. So it's a balance. But the reality is that when you look at vocational education, it is also changing and becoming more knowledge driven. But the reality is there are some skills that are less transferable. And so it's really important to pick and think about what is the balance. A lot of students who go on to do vocational education, they will end up transferring, once they've got the vocational skills, to do a degree as well. That's what's happening a lot, we're seeing. What kind of personality or character a student, a teenager who had to be successful for the future? I think all the things that I've talked about already, thinking really about the ability to be flexible, to be a problem solver. You know, a lot of people struggle with being a problem solver. They are people who raise problems rather than solving problems, and that's not helpful, right? Being able to collaborate with people and building teams and doing group assignments. I mean, this is why we do it at university. We try to get students to do that as much as possible. Let me see, what other questions are there? Which one is more important for a person, 21st century, salary or career? The most important, I think, is to have a fulfilled and happy life, okay? And how do you do that? Some people do it by trying to get more money, and some people do it by, you know, the saying that if you find a job that you love, you never have to work another day. You know, and that whole idea here in Australia, I was saying to my colleagues that we don't even talk about work-life balance anymore, because companies have to start thinking about the well-being and sustainability of their employees and their employees' well-being. So finding a job that you're passionate about, that looks after your well-being, that's what we're looking for. And I think that's really important. Right? The thing that I want to talk about again is that if you pick the right set of skills to develop, right, because you are passionate about those skills, you know, it's like being the brightest red, the brightest green, or the brightest yellow, or brightest gray. You can take them from company to company, right? Those are important things. For a chemistry course, what particular skills are more useful? Are there any particular extracurricular? All the ones that I talk about are really important. It doesn't matter if you are doing chemistry, biology, or philosophy. Those skills that I talk about are really crucial. If you Google LinkedIn's top soft skills, they will tell you that those things that I talk about, they are very real. I spend a lot of time talking to employers across different sectors about what they're looking for. It doesn't matter if you are in engineering or whichever, you need to have confidence, adaptability, problem solving, and initiative, and team building. Those are very, and being creative as well, right? Is chemical engineering a rising degree? Absolutely. Chemical engineering are the people who are building new material, but also things like agricultural waste management. They are looking at a whole range. If you look at what our chemical engineers do, it's really fascinating. It's really applied chemistry and using chemistry as a base knowledge to work into different ways of solving real world problems. They're at the front of sustainability for the world. There's another area, biomedical engineering, that is very similar, but looks at the biomedical side. With you still need to have chemistry, of course, and again, that's another booming area. Is there an avenue for students who have completed the GCSE but do not want to do A-levels to go to Australia via online diploma programs? I'm going to let Kai come in and answer that question in a second after I answer the other career questions. How do you see universities adapting university experience because of COVID? Many are not able to travel. I find digital school difficult. Will this be a key skill for me? Absolutely. I'm sorry to tell you this, but you know, the whole world is not going to go back to just face-to-face. There's going to be some sort of a combination between remote learning and being able to build those skills online, right? So one of the things that we do at university, I'm currently building a module to try and help students about, you know, needing to schedule, take time off, no more than 2 hours on screen time, making sure that you have a schedule and building on that. So international students who are not able to travel, I mean, don't put it off. I think try with 1 or 2 subjects and start to get into the rhythm, because those skills that you learn from the remote digital schooling, it's going to be really important once you come out. You know, I was saying earlier on, you know, that half my students are doing their job interviews via Zoom, right? And so you need to get used to it. And now is the time to try, and don't be scared of it. And universities are very understanding at the moment, and trying and understanding that it's hard for students. So make sure you talk to us if you're struggling with that. What's your thought on yeah, lots of people have multiple jobs. You know, it's actually very normal. You know, a lot of digital entrepreneurs have multiple jobs. You know, they've got side gigs here and there. In fact, a lot of our students have multiple jobs and multiple projects on the go. It's actually quite normal. The thing, though, that's different is that they are doing things they enjoy and they like, so they don't mind doing it. If you are doing multiple jobs and they are all horrible, it is not sustainable and it's not good for your well-being at all, right? So with job hoppers and people graduate who change jobs often, yes, that is a key issue for industry partners, right? So the people in HR are saying, you know, for the people who are the brightest red, brightest yellow, or whatever, they have that set of skills that enable them to switch and change jobs when they are comfortable, right? The power is with them. So this is the thing, right? People say there's no job security. You know, employers will tell you there is no employee loyalty. Okay, especially the top ones. So then who has the power? It's no longer the company. If you spend your life trying to be the you know, going into IT and being green, but you knew that this was not your area, you're not passionate, if you are stuck in that job, you cannot move anywhere. Okay, and if you are lucky to even get a job. But if you are the best green and you want to change, that's not a problem at all. And this is why, you know, companies are struggling with that. Okay, does chemical engineering require a lot of physics or more of chemistry? All engineering requires a bit of physics. Okay. No, chemical engineers work from a range of things, from agriculture to biomedical, through to oil plant through to new materials and nanomaterials, right? So there are many different. There's there's organic chemistry kind of thing. Or you can work in the oil plant. So there is a whole range. Chemical engineering is in everything from food nutrition through to oil, right? Should we be prepared to work in the gig economy? It's not for everyone. Lots of people still want a job rather than going into the gig economy. But the reality is that, you know, if you are passionate about that, then that's a great opportunity, especially for digital entrepreneurs. Okay. So I hope the message is clear. Make sure that you pick something you're passionate about, that the set of skills that are important to you, and avoid the nightmare colors. You know, I've had students tell me that my worst nightmare is the gray color, but my parents tell me I must study commerce. Then that student is going to have a very difficult time. The next 3 years, it's not that the student doesn't want to study or is not studying hard, but they are studying so hard they have no time to develop all the other important skills that companies are looking for. And that's why we have so many business graduates who are unemployable. What we want are business graduates who are passionate about the process, the management, and the economy, and they will do well. And the ones who get jobs are those ones who are passionate about it. There's no point going into an area that you think will have a lot of jobs if you're not passionate about it. The interviewers know the moment they look at you whether it's your area, if you're interested or not. Okay, that's really important. I don't want to miss the question on alternate pathways. Kai or Elaine or Louise, did you want to jump in? Kai.
Hi, thanks, Shanton. I was just waiting for you to answer the rest of the question. So back to that particular question of whether they're alternative, the answer is yes. But if you're aiming to come to the University of Melbourne, you would need to pick the right qualification. So we don't have an online diploma program at the University of Melbourne. So the only qualification that we've got for high school leavers would be a bachelor's degree. So in order to be eligible for any of the bachelor's degree, you need to have completed a qualification that's equivalent to a year 12 or an A level. All right, so you have to pick your course well. What I'm going to do, I'm going to share this link through the chat. It's basically a link to download our undergraduate prospectus. At the back of the prospectus, we have a list of approved qualifications that are deemed equivalent to the Australian Year 12. So you will also find the A-level requirements. So if it's not the A-level, there are others as well. But basically, whatever you pick from that list, it's something that the University of Melbourne would recognize. And I would suggest that if you're looking at other universities in other countries as well, and especially if they are the really reputable and old traditional universities, then they too may have a limited list of qualifications that they recognize. So you might want to be very careful what you're going to choose after the IGCSE. Now, if you're going to choose like a one-year foundation from, say, Malaysia or another country, then even though you have done very well, it may not be a qualification that Melbourne Uni or maybe the Russell Group in the UK would recognize. So I would just advise that there are lots of options, but just make sure that you do your research well and pick one of the ones that are more internationally recognized. So that's just my advice. But if it's like A levels, if you find that you can't cope with, I don't know, the green range subjects, then I'm sure Alice Smith will have the other options for you. So so you can have maybe a further discussion with your school counselors at Alice Smith to see what works best for you. So that's all I can advise, but just refer to that brochure that I've just shared on the chat. I hope this helps.
Thank you, Kai. There was a question that I missed earlier on, and which is, how is our university actually adapting post-COVID? I think there are a few things that we are doing that are absolutely crucial. The first one is to understand how industries actually changed, right? And one of the key things is that I'm doing a lot of work trying to talk to our employers, looking at what they're expecting. And this is why you're the first to actually hear it here on the kind of things around being able to do those things remotely, being able to do assessment centers remotely for the big companies, and being able to do the research online. That's absolutely crucial. The reality is that a lot of companies, right, even education, right, teachers and schools, no one is going to go back to the way it was. The reality has changed. In 1 year, the world has shifted. And people have discovered that working remotely and working from home, all those kind of things, and the flexibility and flexi hours has become a mainstay of industries, right? And so as much as we will go back to face-to-face eventually, hopefully soon, there will be some elements where you will be expected to be able to build teams remotely. You will be able to do a number of processes remotely and be able to work across virtual teams, right? And this is the key thing around how it's changed. So for us as a university, we are quick to respond to that, is to make sure that our students are aware of that and to do that. The challenge, of course, is that there are a whole range of students that say, we're not going to start university until we can go face-to-face. You're going to be surprised when you come to us face-to-face that there will be some things we require to do online. And that's not because of anything other than the fact that we need to prepare you for the reality of the future. A good university doesn't just do things the easy way. And we know that some students don't want it, but we have to show them why it's important. And this is how you show interest in the students' well-being and their future. And how do I know this? I keep in touch with a lot of our alumni. And our alumni all work across from the UK through to Australia and everywhere in between. And they are all seeing changes in the way that they work as well. And companies are not going to go back to the way it was. So we have to respond as well as universities, and I'm sure schools are responding, because even post-pandemic, I'm sure schools are going to be doing a whole lot more flipped classrooms, and that's what is already happening in many parts of the world. I think I've answered all the questions. I hope that has been useful. Thank you for coming on to the session. I hope that you found that it was interesting and gave you some new information. Thank you, Elisa.
Hi, Shanton.
Hi,
Mr.
Joe.
Marshall here. How are you?
Good, good.
Sorry I missed the start of the presentation.
Okay.
Absolutely fantastic as always. And just brilliant to hear. This is, again, something we spend a lot of time working on. And again, it's just always fantastic that not only are you kind of backing up a lot of what we've been saying, but as always, add a whole new layer to it that we have to go and research ourselves now and go and make sure that we're presenting back to everyone on a regular basis. So I just want to say absolutely thank you for coming again. Really appreciate it. And it was just another excellent presentation. And again, if anyone's got any final questions, we're happy to kind of stay on for a bit longer and just pick those up. So if anyone does want to talk directly, we'll even allow you to switch your microphones on and speak if you would like to actually use your voice rather than type. We'll hang around for a few more minutes in this session and just allow everyone a chance if they want to ask any more questions, because you've got such an unusually gifted expert here in front of you to have that opportunity to ask you. Shanton, actually,
Yeah.
I'll just ask you something. Obviously, the last time I left Malaysia was probably when I saw you in Melbourne last February. And one of the really exciting things that we were talking about then, or you were discussing, was on the own course that you run. So in the computer science, information science master's degree, I think you were discussing that you were running. You were talking about the additional classes that you encouraged your students to take. And it was things like drama and music and more artistic things. I wonder if you could just sort of elaborate a bit more on that. I think that might sort of maybe calcify a bit in people's minds exactly how this, using skills or developing skills might look practically while you're at university.
Okay. So one of the key things that we say to our IT students, for example, is that IT employers, there are a whole bunch of them. People think that it's IBM, Microsoft, and all, that sort of companies, and Google. But the reality is that most of our graduates work in everything from the zoo through to government, right? So if you have an interest in working with animals, we have people who are building apps that enable the gorillas at the zoo to communicate with the zookeepers and also with the visitors. It's amazing, right? At the same time, we have people in music as well. We've got people in businesses. So the thing about the 21st century thinking is it's not one thing. Nobody does one thing anymore. It's about using the skills that you have and being able to bring it to different areas. Our art students, for example, we encourage our art students to take a bit of understanding of digital and data science and digital marketing, for example, right? So that they don't have to do programming, but at least they understand how the digital world works. It's the same with business students. So in the same vein, for my IT students, I have been known to send them to drama classes for the simple reason of making sure that my next generation of IT professionals can talk to human beings as well as they talk to computers. And that's a win, right? That's really important because sometimes the IT people prefer not to talk to people. And so we want to break them out of that and to encourage them to work across more collaboratively. It's the same. This is why the engineering degree at Melbourne Uni is a bit longer than many other places. So you do a 3-year undergraduate degree followed by a 2-year master. So you get a science degree as well as a master in engineering. And part of that is because we also get you to do a whole range of other stuff that makes you a more complete and more in-demand engineer, whether it's chemical engineer through to civil engineer through to mechatronics.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's brilliant. That shows a bit more what the scope of these degrees can be. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any final questions from anyone? Otherwise, we'll probably wind down this session. So unless you have any final questions for Shanton, if you'd just like to now leave the Zoom, and we'll obviously stay here if you do have any. And again, you can type those or turn your microphone on and verbalise them. Either is absolutely fine. But if you feel like you've got everything you can from this particular session, then please now leave the Zoom. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.